Bear was digging like crazy. I thought he found a bone. But then I saw a head, a German Shepherd puppy, half buried. And those eyes, they weren't just scared, they were giving up. It happened just past noon on the edge of Palm Desert, California. The sun was sharp, mean. You could taste the dust in your throat. We'd taken the trail behind the gated community, the one no one really uses anymore, just me and Bear. He's my 1.5-year-old Labrador Retriever. Brown coat, smart as anything, loyal to the core. I rescued him from the shelter last summer after a wildfire nearly ended him. Since then, we've been inseparable. I thought I'd seen it all, but I hadn't seen this. He pulled free of the leash like he was possessed, charged into a low, thorny thicket that ran along the ridge. I followed, cursing under my breath, squinting against the heat. Bear was clawing at the earth, hard, not like play. It was frantic, focused, like he knew. I shouted, "What the hell are you doing, buddy?" That's when I saw it. First, the dirt shifted in a way that made my stomach drop. Then I saw something pale, a shape, a head, muzzle, and then eyes. I froze. A German Shepherd puppy, just his head above the sand, his ears pinned flat, one eye swollen, his little body still like he'd already surrendered to the dirt. He wasn't making a sound, not a whimper, just blinking slow, like every blink might be his last. I dropped to my knees. Jesus, he's alive. Bear backed off just enough to let me in, but he didn't leave. He lay down right beside the puppy, panting, watching me like, "Don't mess this up." I clawed at the ground with my bare hands. Dry sand and bits of stones scraped my fingers bloody, but I didn't care. Every inch of him I uncovered felt like pulling someone out of a grave. His paws were raw, tied. There was a frayed green rope still around one leg, like someone hadn't finished the job or didn't care if he was found. My gut turned. Who could do this? I whispered, "Hang on, buddy, you're not alone." He blinked again, slower this time. I couldn't tell if it was relief or goodbye. Bear nudged my shoulder and whimpered. The puppy's eyes shifted toward him, barely, but it moved. I looked down that ridge, thinking, we're miles from the car. No signal, no water, it's just us. And he's barely breathing. I wrapped him in my shirt, pressed him to my chest. His heartbeat, it was there, but faint. I could feel his bones through his fur. He weighed almost nothing. Bear walked beside me like a soldier. I had one question hammering in my head the whole way back. Did we find him in time? He didn't make a sound the entire walk back. That's what scared me most. Most puppies cry. They whimper, they fight, they tremble. But this German Shepherd puppy, he just went limp in my arms like he didn't know what it meant to be held anymore. Like being buried alive had convinced him the world was done with him. I kept whispering, "Hold on, buddy. Just hold on." I said it 100 times like a prayer. Bear stayed glued to my side, occasionally looking up at the bundle in my arms, ears twitching with every breath the little guy did or didn't take. By the time we reached the Jeep, I was drenched in sweat and shaking. I didn't even buckle him in, just laid him across the passenger seat and told Bear to sit in back. He did, without protest. The nearest vet was 15 minutes away in Cathedral City. I ran every light. I didn't even remember parking. I just remember bursting through the clinic door like a madman, yelling, "He's alive, but barely." They didn't ask questions, just took one look and rushed him to the back. I stood there, covered in dirt and blood and panic. One of the techs touched my shoulder and said gently, "Do you know his name?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. All I could see was his face, covered in sand, eyes too tired to hope. "No," I said quietly. "He doesn't have one." Bear nudged my knee with his nose and sat at my feet like he was standing guard. Like this was his mission too. The vet, Dr. Rivera, came out after what felt like hours. Her face was unreadable. He's severely dehydrated, has minor abrasions and significant stress trauma. His oxygen levels are low. But, she paused, he's a fighter. He made it this far. I swallowed hard. Is he going to live? She looked me straight in the eye. We're doing everything we can. The next 12 hours are critical. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She added, "We put him on fluids and ran some tests. He's not chipped, no ID. Whoever left him didn't want him found." I clenched my fists. My jaw ached from holding back what I wanted to scream. They let me sit by his kennel after he stabilized. He lay curled up on a towel, his eyes half-lidded, a tiny tube in his foreleg. Bear lay right outside the kennel, watching, waiting. Breathing slow, matching him breath for breath. I reached in and gently touched the puppy's paw. He didn't flinch, he didn't move, but he didn't pull away either. I whispered, "You're not in the dirt anymore. You're safe, I promise." He didn't respond, but Bear did. He let out one soft, short bark. Just one, quiet, purposeful, like a reminder. I looked at him, then back at the puppy, and for the first time I saw the faintest flicker in those eyes. Not light, not life, but the shadow of a question, like he was wondering, is it really over? I stayed with him through the afternoon. The clinic let me sit on the floor beside the kennel, Bear curled at my back like a breathing shadow. I didn't leave to eat, didn't drink, didn't check my phone, nothing else mattered. Every now and then, the German Shepherd puppy would twitch, tiny involuntary movements, like his body was still trying to fight even while unconscious. The vet said that was a good sign, that his nervous system hadn't shut down completely. But it didn't feel like a good sign. It felt like watching someone wrestle with a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. The hours dragged. The IV bag dripped, slow and steady. I watched every drop fall like it might be the one to bring him back. At one point, I laid my hand flat inside the kennel and just let it rest near his head. Not touching, just close enough that if he moved, he'd feel me. And did. His nose twitched. He inched forward, so slow I almost missed it. His chin came to rest right against my thumb, and he stayed there. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Bear saw it too. His tail gave one soft thump against the floor. That was the moment I realized he wasn't gone. Not yet. Something inside him was still fighting. I looked at him and whispered, "You want to stay, don't you?" He didn't answer, but his breathing deepened, just a little. Like my voice had reached some tiny, unreachable place inside him. Later that evening, Dr. Rivera came back with updated blood work and scans. She knelt down next to me, soft voice, professional eyes. "He's responding to fluids. Temperature's coming up, no signs of internal bleeding. We were lucky." That word hit me hard. I looked at the puppy, who hadn't moved since pressing his head to my hand. Lucky, I said it out loud, tasting the word. It fit. He was buried and breathing. Forgotten but found. A heartbeat in the dirt. That wasn't just survival. That was luck. I leaned in close to his ear. "Your name's Lucky. You hear me? You're lucky." His ear twitched. Bear stood up, came to the front of the kennel, and pressed his nose to the door. Lucky's eyes blinked once. Then again, barely open but not empty, and then his paw moved. Slow, wobbly. He reached forward until it touched the bars, right where Bear's nose waited. They connected, dog to dog, silent, gentle, powerful. I watched them like I was witnessing something ancient and sacred. Bear sat down again, tail swaying. Lucky didn't move after that. He drifted back to sleep, finally at peace. But the contact stayed. His little paw against the gate, Bear's nose pressed close. And I thought, maybe he wasn't just lucky to be found. Maybe he was lucky, because Bear was the one who found him. By the next morning, Lucky was breathing on his own. It wasn't strong or steady, but it was enough to convince the staff he wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. When I arrived just after sunrise, still wearing yesterday's clothes, the nurse at the front desk smiled and said, "He made it through the night." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until it left me all at once. Bear trotted beside me, ears up, tail low, focused like he knew where we were going and why. We walked straight to the recovery room, and there he was. The German Shepherd puppy was still lying on his side, IV in place, head resting on a folded towel, but something had changed. His eyes were open, wide, alert, cautious. When he saw Bear, he moved his head just enough to follow him. No bark, no wag, just attention. That was enough for me. I crouched beside him. "Morning, Lucky." He blinked. I reached in slowly and laid my hand down near him again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He nudged forward, weak but deliberate, and rested his chin on my palm. I felt the lump in my throat rise so fast I had to look away. Bear came around the side and sat next to me, his body pressed to my hip, as if to say, "Let's stay here. He needs this." I looked at Lucky again, at the dust still clinging to his fur, the tiny cuts across his nose, the bone-thin ribs under his coat, and I thought about the green rope we'd found near his legs. Someone didn't just forget him. They tried to erase him. Whoever did this meant for him to never be found. But Bear did, and Lucky, he wasn't ready to be erased. I asked Dr. Rivera if I could bring something for him, anything to make him feel like he wasn't just another broken case behind a steel door. She nodded. "If you have something soft, a blanket maybe. And come often. He responds better when you're here." I drove home and dug through my old storage box, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside was a faded blue blanket. Thin, worn, chewed on the corners. It belonged to Max, my old German Shepherd. He died 6 years ago. I held it in my hands, remembering the way he used to curl up in it like it was stitched with safety. It still smelled faintly of cedar and fur. And loss. I brought it back and gently laid it under Lucky. He shifted slightly, just enough to bury his nose in the fabric. His eyes closed. That was the first time he slept without trembling. I stayed another few hours, Bear never leaving his side. At one point, a nurse chuckled and said, "They look like brothers." Maybe they were. One rescued from fire, the other from dirt, both survivors. And for the first time since Bear started digging, I allowed myself one small thought. Maybe this story wasn't going to end in grief. By the end of that second day, Lucky stood up. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't steady, but it was his choice. His legs wobbled like saplings in wind, and for a terrifying moment I thought he'd fall. But he didn't. He braced, lowered his head, and locked eyes with Bear like he was drawing strength just by seeing him. Then he took a step. The whole room held its breath. Even the vet tech beside me whispered, "Did you see that?" I nodded, but I couldn't speak. My chest felt too full. Bear let out a soft woof and lay down, tail sweeping the floor. Lucky took another shaky step toward him, then collapsed, right into Bear's front paws. He didn't yelp, didn't cry, just sighed, like he had reached the safest place on earth. Bear leaned in and gently licked Lucky's ear. I turned away for a second, pretending to check my phone just to hide the tears sliding down my cheek. He was fighting. He wanted life. When Dr. Rivera came to check his vitals, she was smiling for the first time. "He's not just recovering," she said. "He's choosing to come back." That hit me harder than I expected. I remembered something my father once told me when our old shepherd got sick. Survival isn't just the body, it's the will. And Lucky, he had it. Over the next few days, he started eating again, small bites at first, then bigger ones. Every meal felt like a celebration. Bear always sat nearby, watching like a proud older brother. When Lucky finished, he'd crawl over and nuzzle into Bear's side, curling like a leaf into shelter. One afternoon, I brought a soft toy from the shelter, something squeaky, just to test his response. I tossed it gently near his front paws. He sniffed it, nudged it once, then again. Then, with a tiny, uncertain growl, he bit it. Bear's tail went wild, so did mine. It was the first spark of puppy energy I'd seen in him, a flicker of who he might have been before someone tried to bury him. Later that evening, after the clinic closed, I sat with him in the recovery room. The lights were dim. Lucky lay against Bear, both of them breathing slow and steady. I stroked Lucky's back gently and whispered, "You know, I think you were waiting for him, not me." His ear flicked. I smiled. "But I'm glad you got us both." I looked at Bear, who raised his head and stared right back like he understood everything. And in that quiet, dusty little room under California skies, I finally allowed myself to believe this German Shepherd puppy, he wasn't just going to survive. He was going to live. The first time Lucky wagged his tail, I almost missed it. It was so small, just a slow sway, barely there, like his body was trying to remember how to feel joy. But Bear noticed instantly. He perked up, leaned over, and gave Lucky a playful nudge with his nose. Lucky responded with the softest chuff of air, like the ginnings of a laugh stuck in his throat. We were outside that day, finally. The clinic had a small, fenced-in courtyard behind the building. Nothing fancy, just patchy grass and some potted plants wilting under the desert sun. But to Lucky, it was another world. Dr. Rivera had cleared him for short, supervised outings. "Let's see how he handles the open," she said. "He's earned some sunshine." I carried him out, wrapped in a blanket, his limbs still thin, but stronger than before. When we stepped into the light, he blinked fast, confused at first. The sun must have felt like a stranger. Bear ran ahead and turned, tail wagging, coaxing him forward. I placed Lucky gently on the grass. For a moment, he just lay there, ears low, uncertain. But then his nose lifted. He sniffed, the air, the ground, my shoes, Bear's tail. And slowly, he stood. One step, then another, wobbly, crooked but real. Each footfall a victory. Bear stayed close, circling him like a satellite. I swear he was smiling, tongue lolling, body loose, almost dancing. And then came that little flick of Lucky's tail. Hope. I sank down on the grass and watched them move together. One strong, one fragile, but somehow in sync. Lucky didn't stray far. Every time Bear stepped away, he followed, even if it meant stumbling into him. At one point, Bear dropped into a play bow, chest down, rear up, tail swaying, and gave a low, excited bark. Lucky froze, then almost shyly mirrored him. Sort of. His front legs buckled too fast, and he fell nose first into the dirt. Bear bounded over, licking his face, nudging his side like, "Try again, kid!" Lucky shook his head and sneezed, spitting out grass, then looked up at me with these wide, amber eyes that said everything without a word. He wasn't scared anymore. That night, back inside, I stayed later than usual, just watching them. Bear asleep at the door, Lucky curled against his side, still trembling slightly from the effort but full of something new. I reached out and stroked the back of Lucky's neck, feeling the soft, patchy fur growing in where the dirt had once clung. He didn't flinch, instead he leaned into it. There was a moment of silence. No machines beeping, no vet chatter, just the hum of the room and our breathing. I whispered, "You're not broken, you're becoming." And I meant it. This German Shepherd puppy wasn't just healing, he was learning what it meant to be a dog again. And maybe, just maybe, I was learning what it meant to open my heart again too. By the end of the week, Lucky started following Bear everywhere. Not just in the yard, but inside the clinic too. If Bear stood, Lucky stood. If Bear walked to the water bowl, Lucky limped after him, ears perked, tail twitching like a metronome of courage. It wasn't fast, it wasn't smooth, but it was his. Everyone noticed. "He's imprinted on him," Dr. Rivera smiled one morning, watching them move down the hallway side by side. "That Labrador of yours might have just saved his life twice." I nodded, watching the German Shepherd puppy take uneven steps along the tiled floor, his little legs working harder than they should have to. He was still underweight, still weak, but now there was purpose in his movement. Direction. Bear stopped at the glass door leading to the front office. Lucky bumped gently into his side and looked up, waiting. Bear looked at me, like asking permission. I chuckled and said, "All right, go ahead." The two of them trotted forward, Bear like a calm guardian, Lucky like a shadow learning how to shine. The receptionist bent down to pet them both. "I swear, they're starting to look like a team." "Maybe they already are," I murmured. That night, I brought them both home for a trial visit, just a few hours outside the clinic to see how Lucky would do in a real space. Dr. Rivera said it might help his mind as much as his body. When I opened the door to my place, modest, one bedroom, walls a bit too beige, Bear ran in first like he always did, but this time he paused halfway into the living room and looked back. Lucky stood on the welcome mat, nose twitching, front paw raised. "Come on, buddy," I said softly. He stepped forward. One step, then two. The floor was smoother than he was used to. He slid once, caught himself, then kept going. His claws clicked gently as he followed Bear into the room. I had laid out blankets on the floor, soft toys, and that same faded blue blanket from Max's old crate. Lucky sniffed it, pawed it, then laid down in the center like it had been waiting for him all along. I sat on the couch, quietly watching, unsure if this was the right time or too much, too soon. But Bear curled beside him, and Lucky sighed, eyes heavy, body loose. Not tense, not afraid, safe. I watched them breathe together, rise, fall, one rhythm. And something inside me cracked open. I hadn't let another dog into my home since Max. Not really, not for more than a night or two. I always told myself I couldn't do it again. Not after what losing him did to me. But this German Shepherd puppy, he'd been buried and broken and still found the strength to trust again. How could I not? I leaned back, closed my eyes, and whispered to the ceiling, "You were right, Max. The house needed another shepherd." In the silence, Bear let out a quiet sigh. And Lucky, still curled in his blanket, wagged his tail once in his sleep. The next morning, something happened that stopped me cold. I was pouring coffee in the kitchen when I heard soft steps behind me, uneven, slow, but determined. I turned around, expecting Bear. It was Lucky. The German Shepherd puppy was walking. Not just wobbling from blanket to blanket, but actually walking across the kitchen floor. No hesitation, no fear. Just forward. He reached me, looked up, and sat down with a heavy exhale like he just climbed a mountain. I knelt beside him, my hand already reaching for his scruff. "Well, look at you." He blinked at me, then leaned in, pressed his forehead gently against my chest. No sound, no whimper, just trust. I didn't move, didn't speak, I just let it happen. That was the first time he came to me on his own. Later that morning, Bear coaxed him outside again. I opened the sliding door and watched them head toward the patch of grass near the fence. Lucky paused at the edge, sunlight warming his back, and then he ran. Not fast, not far, but it was a run. His paws kicked up little sprays of dirt, and his ears flopped unevenly as he chased Bear in a lopsided arc. Bear let him lead, circling back, pretending to be slow. I laughed so hard I startled a dove from the fence post. He was alive. More than that, he was living. When we returned to the clinic for his next checkup, the staff gathered around like a welcoming committee. One of the nurses crouched beside him and whispered, "Is this the same puppy?" Dr. Rivera grinned. "No, this is the version of him that was buried deep inside." She ran her hands gently along his ribcage, checking for strength and tone. Still underweight, still healing, but his body's catching up to his spirit. After the exam, she pulled me aside. "Jason, he's ready for release. If you want to make it official." I looked down at Lucky, now sprawled in the waiting room beside Bear, chewing on the corner of a tennis ball. "Yeah," I said. "I want him home." I signed the papers. That evening, I brought home a new dog bed. It was bigger than he needed. Fluffy, overkill. But Bear had one, and it only felt right that Lucky should, too. I placed it beside Bear's usual spot in the corner of the living room. Lucky sniffed it, circled twice, then promptly curled up on Bear's bed. Bear looked up from across the room, blinked once, and without a sound, crawled into Lucky's bed instead. I smiled, shook my head, and dropped to the floor between them. They both reached their paws toward me at the same time, and I realized maybe they didn't need two separate beds. Maybe what they needed was each other. A few days later, the weather turned. A storm rolled in over Palm Desert, unusual for late spring, but fierce. The skies darkened fast, and the wind picked up enough to shake the windows in their frames. I sat by the sliding glass door watching the first drops fall heavy against the glass. Bear was curled at my feet, calm as ever. But Lucky, he was pacing. The German Shepherd puppy kept walking small loops near the couch, tail low, ears pulled back. Every gust of wind made him flinch. Every roll of thunder froze him in place. I called gently, "Lucky, it's okay. Just rain, buddy." He didn't move toward me. Instead, he stared out the window, his body rigid, his eyes locked on something that wasn't there. Something remembered, and I suddenly understood. Rain, wet earth, the smell of dirt. It was taking him back to the moment he woke up buried. I stood and moved toward him slowly. "Hey, you're not there anymore. You hear me? You're here, you're home." Still, he didn't budge, just stood frozen, as if the floor beneath him might give way again. Then Bear got up. He padded across the room and sat beside Lucky. Didn't touch him, didn't nudge, just sat, solid, steady. Lucky's head turned slowly. He looked at Bear, eyes wide and glassy, and then he leaned. He pressed into Bear's side like he was anchoring himself. His breathing slowed. The shaking in his legs eased. Bear didn't move, and slowly, Lucky curled into him, wrapping his body tight against the only thing he fully trusted. I knelt beside them and placed my hand gently on Lucky's back. "You're not underground," I whispered. "You're in the light. With us." Outside, the storm grew louder. Inside, it passed. Later that night, the rain turned to a soft drizzle, and I opened the back door just to let in the smell of wet earth. Bear went out first. Lucky hesitated at the threshold, paw raised. I waited. Then, quietly, he stepped outside. He walked slowly into the yard, sniffed the damp air, then looked up at the sky. Rain tapped his nose. He blinked, shook it off, then moved forward. And then he barked, just once. But it was loud, confident, alive. Bear barked back. I stood in the doorway, hands in my pockets, feeling something loosen in my chest. The German Shepherd puppy who had once been buried beneath the sand was now barking into the sky. It happened just before dawn. I woke to Bear pacing the hallway, nails clicking sharp against the hardwood. He never did that unless something was wrong. I sat up fast, heart thudding, and called out, "Bear? What is it?" Then I heard it, a soft, low whine coming from the living room. I threw on a shirt and rushed out. Lucky was sprawled on the rug, legs out to the side, breathing shallow and quick. His eyes were open but distant, unfocused. His tongue hung slightly out of his mouth, dry. He didn't lift his head when I called his name. "Lucky?" No response. I dropped to my knees and touched his chest. It rose but barely. His body was hot, too hot. My mind raced. He hadn't shown any signs the day before. He'd been eating, walking, even playing with Bear in the yard, and now he was slipping. Bear whined and pressed his nose to Lucky's side, nudging gently. Nothing. I wrapped him in a towel and ran. No shoes, no keys, just instinct. I carried him like a child down the steps and into the Jeep, Bear jumping into the back seat without needing to be told. The vet's emergency line rang 4 times before someone answered. I must have sounded out of my mind, but they told me to bring him in right away. The sun hadn't even crested the hills when I slammed through the clinic doors. The same vet tech who'd first seen him weeks ago took one look and shouted for the crash cart. "Don't leave us now." I kept whispering, "You're lucky. You're lucky." They worked on him in the back for what felt like an eternity. I sat on the floor of the waiting room, covered in sweat, dust, and fear. Bear lay beside me, head down, eyes locked on the swinging double doors. I remembered how still Lucky had been when we first found him, how close he came to being gone before he ever had a name. Was this the same goodbye all over again? After what felt like a lifetime, Dr. Rivera came through the doors. Her face was tight, serious. "It was a delayed reaction," she said. "A fever spike from an old infection still in his bloodstream. Probably from the wounds on his legs, one flared up beneath the surface. It overwhelmed his system." "Is he?" I couldn't finish. She nodded slowly. "He's stable. Barely. We cooled him down and started a new round of antibiotics. But Jason, this one was close." I sat back against the wall and closed my eyes. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Can I see him? Of course. They let me into the dim room where he lay on a padded table, IVs running again, machines softly beeping. His eyes were closed, but he was breathing, a slow, gentle rise and fall. Bear padded over and sat down right beside him. His head lowered until it touched Lucky's side. And then, Lucky moved. The tiniest shift. His paw curled just slightly until it came to rest on top of Bear's. I lost it. The tears came hard and fast, like a dam finally giving way. I leaned in, placed my hand on Lucky's paw, and whispered, "You don't get to leave, not now. Not after all this." The German Shepherd puppy didn't answer. He just breathed. But that was enough. He was still fighting. And this time, he wasn't fighting alone. Like 3 days passed before Lucky opened his eyes again. Not just the slow, hazy blinks from before, but fully open, alert, aware. The moment it happened, Bear was already at his side, tail thumping wildly against the kennel wall. I had fallen asleep in the chair next to them, crumpled awkwardly when the noise woke me. I looked up and saw him staring at me. Not past me. At me. "Hey," I breathed, sitting forward. "You're back." His ears twitched. He didn't move much, but he didn't need to. That look in his eyes, it was real. Present. The German Shepherd puppy who'd been buried, rescued, almost lost again, he was back. I pressed the call button. The staff rushed in, cheerful and shocked, surrounding him like he was a miracle. Because he was. Dr. Rivera stood at the foot of the kennel, arms crossed, shaking her head with a half smile. "This boy doesn't quit." "I don't think he knows how," I whispered. Lucky recovered faster this time, like his body had already learned the path. The fever faded, his appetite returned, and soon he was moving again, slow but purposeful, determined. Every day, Bear walked beside him like a guardian shadow. They became a team. One young and learning, the other strong and steady. Where one went, the other followed. We brought Lucky home for good at the end of that week. This time, no trial, no half steps, just home. He stepped through the front door like he belonged there. Not cautiously, not nervously. Confident. Like he remembered, like he understood. I had cleared out a corner of the living room and turned it into his own space. New bed, new toys. A bowl with his name painted on it. Lucky in blocky blue letters. He walked straight to it, sniffed the edge, and licked the side once before plopping down in the bed. Bear dropped beside him a second later. I couldn't stop smiling. That evening something happened I'll never forget. I stepped out onto the porch to get the mail. When I turned around, Lucky was standing at the screen door, watching me. His eyes tracked me with total awareness. Not fear, not longing, just presence. I walked back and opened the door. He didn't move, so I knelt and opened my arms. He walked right into them. This German Shepherd puppy, who had once been left to die in the dirt, buried like he didn't matter, now pressed his head into my chest and sighed the deepest, fullest breath I'd ever felt from him. He was choosing me, and I knew in that moment I had no choice but to choose him right back. From that day forward, he never left my side. At the shelter, they became known as the Desert Duo, Bear and Lucky. Every morning, they waited by the front door. Every evening, they curled up together like one heartbeat. People ask me what made Lucky so special, why this puppy of all the rescues I'd seen. I always said the same thing. He wasn't just rescued, he rescued us too. Some stories are born from pain, but they grow into something bigger, something lasting. Lucky's story started in the dirt, under the punishing sun of Palm Desert, buried, broken, and alone. But it didn't end there, because one dog, Bear, refused to ignore what others had, and because of that, a life was pulled back from the edge. This German Shepherd puppy didn't just survive. He learned to live, to trust, to love again. And in doing so, he reminded everyone around him what resilience really looks like. He reminded me. Because caring for a rescued puppy is more than love, it's responsibility. It's patience. It's showing up on the days when they can't stand and celebrating the moments when they finally do. Lucky went from a forgotten shadow to a protector, a beacon. Today, he and Bear welcome every visitor at the shelter door. Two survivors side by side, showing what second chances can become. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. They make miracles like Lucky's possible, not just for the animals, but for the people who find them too. So if this story touched your heart, please share it. You never know who might need a reminder that healing is possible, even when it begins in the darkest place. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope. She lay crumpled in the gutter beside an overflowing dumpster, her white fur stained brown with filth, rainwater pooling under her body. The stench of rotting garbage hung in the air, mixing with the metallic tang of the city's steam vents. A white German Shepherd puppy, skin stretched tight over her bones, looked more like a discarded rag than something alive. Her bright green eyes were half closed, dull, as a trail of water trickled down her muzzle. A shoe splashed near her head, and a man stepped over her without even looking down. Another woman glanced, then turned away, clutching her coffee tighter. The traffic roared a block away, horns blaring, the world moving on like she wasn't even there. I froze, mid-step, my chest tightening. She tried to curl tighter against the cold brick wall, but her legs barely moved. Her breathing was shallow, uneven, every inhale a fight. For a heartbeat, our eyes met, and something in that glance tore through me. Her gaze wasn't pleading. It was empty, like she'd already given up. A thin tremor ran through her body, then stopped. I dropped to my knees, the rain soaking through my jeans, my hands sliding under her fragile frame. Her fur was icy. No, stay with me, I whispered. A weak rise of her chest, then nothing. I pressed my ear to her mouth. Silence. The sound of the dumpster lid clanging shut somewhere behind me jolted me into action. I tilted her head back, my hands shaking, and gave her my first breath. The taste of rain and dust filled my lungs as I whispered, "You're not done yet, Piper. Not today." I slid my arms under her, shocked at how weightless she felt. A German Shepherd puppy at 8 months should have had strength, muscle, life. But Piper was a bundle of bones and damp fur, her head lolling limply against my forearm. The smell of rain-soaked garbage clung to her, mixing with the faint sourness of neglect. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I lowered her onto the wet pavement, just enough to check for breathing. Nothing. I pressed my fingers to her neck. There it was, faint and uneven, like a clock running out of wind. "Don't you dare quit on me," I whispered, my voice breaking. I pulled my jacket off and wrapped it around her, shielding her from the cold drizzle, the city's chaos closing in around us. My knees were soaked, my palms shaking as I fished my phone from my pocket. The dispatcher's calm voice felt impossibly far away as I rattled off the address. "She's not breathing right. She's just a puppy. Hurry." I put the phone down, one hand still holding hers, my thumb brushing the dirt-caked fur. "Piper," I said, anchoring her to a name, to the idea she mattered. My breath fogged in the cool air as I leaned close, willing my own strength into her still body. The rain ran down my face, mingling with the heat in my eyes. Somewhere behind me, the faint wail of sirens cut through the city's noise, but they felt miles away. I tightened my hold on her paw, silently bargaining with a life too fragile to lose. The sirens were close now, but so was the silence. Would they be in time? The animal ambulance jerked to a stop at the curb, doors thrown open as if the city itself had pried them apart. 2 techs were suddenly there, gloved hands, clipped voices, sliding a board beneath Piper while I steadied her head. She was limp, a white German Shepherd puppy who should have been all spring and clumsy paws, now a damp bundle without weight. "No chest rise," the woman said, already fitting a tiny oxygen mask over her muzzle. The hissing sound felt like a promise. I climbed in without asking, knees on the rubber floor, rain still dripping from my sleeves. The driver punched the siren and we lunged into Philadelphia traffic, weaving between buses and taxis, the world a smear of gray and red through the back windows. "Stay with me," I murmured, my hand on Piper's paw. It was cold and muddy, the nails worn short from scraping concrete. The tech checked her gums and shook her head. "Oxygen. Let's move." The ambulance vibrated around us as we hit a pothole that rattled the cabinets. Piper's chest trembled, then went quiet. I leaned closer. No sound, no breath. The tech started compressions with 2 careful fingers counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. I tilted Piper's head, my mouth close to the mask, feeding air as gently as I could. Somewhere in the noise, a memory cut through like a blade. Me at 8 years old, sitting on the linoleum of our kitchen, my family's old shepherd slipping her head into my lap as thunder rolled outside. I remember promising I'd keep her safe. I remember failing. The memory tasted like tin. "She's trying," the tech said. I didn't see it. I only saw the stillness, the damp lashes clumped with rain, the green eyes that had met mine once and then drifted away as if it hurt to hold on. "Come on, Piper," I whispered. "Come back." I pressed my palm lightly against her ribs and felt a faint quiver under the bone, like a secret. The mask fogged a little with each of my breaths, but not from her. The monitors blinked, indifferent. The city outside screamed past Market Street, then a blur of storefronts and umbrellas, while inside the ambulance time narrowed to her paw in my hand and the hiss of oxygen. The tech lifted the mask to adjust the seal, and for a split second I swore I saw her chest float upward, a shallow wave crossing her sternum. I held still, afraid to scare it away. "There," I said. The tech looked, listened, and nodded once. "Keep talking to her. She might hear you." I didn't know if that was science or mercy, but I clung to it like rope. "My name is Alex," I told her, because names anchor us to this world. "Alex Carter. You're not a nobody. You're Piper. You're mine to carry for now." The driver swung us onto the hospital ramp, tires squealing, rain slashing the windshield. When the doors flew open, a vet team was waiting. A flurry of blue scrubs, calm eyes, purpose. We rolled straight through double doors into fluorescent light, the smell of antiseptic and warm air washing the street out of our clothes. A vet clipped Piper to new monitors. Another started a line. A third listened at her chest with a stethoscope, her brow knitting. "Severe dehydration, malnourished, possible infection," she said to the room, then to me, softer. "She's critical, but she's here." I stood against the wall, palm stinging as the adrenaline burned away. Piper's ear twitched. It was tiny. It was everything. The vet turned the oxygen up a notch. "You did good," she said. I shook my head because good would have been finding her earlier when her legs still worked, when her trust hadn't already snapped. The monitor chirped. Too slow, too thin, but steady. The vet crouched so we were eye level. "We need hours," she said. "Maybe days. She'll need more than medicine. She'll need a reason." I slid down to the tile beside the kennel they'd moved her into, the glass fogging at the corners from the warm air inside. Piper's eyes fluttered, a dull sea glass green finding me through the haze. I pressed my fingers to the glass where her paw lay and felt the ghost of pressure back, maybe reflex, maybe choice. "Right here," I whispered. "I'm right here." A single breath shivered through her chest, fragile and defiant, like a match catching in the wind. It wasn't enough to save her, but it was enough to keep me from letting go. The clinic smelled faintly of bleach and warm fur, the kind of sterile comfort that tells you lives are fought for here every day. Piper lay in a small kennel, a fleece blanket tucked around her thin body, an IV line snaking into her foreleg. The white German Shepherd puppy looked impossibly fragile under the fluorescent light, her fur still matted in places where the rain and grime clung despite the tech's gentle cleaning. I pulled a chair close, my knees almost against the kennel door, and sat so she could see me. Her eyes fluttered open, those unreal green eyes, and for a moment they held mine. No fear, no recognition, just exhaustion. I pressed my fingers against the cool metal bars, letting her smell the salt of my skin. The vet, Dr. Moreno, came over with a clipboard. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, respiratory infection. Old rope burns on the neck, but no fractures. Her voice softened. She's got a fight ahead. I nodded, eyes fixed on Piper. I've got the time. The vet gave me a small smile, like she'd heard those words before and knew the weight they carried. Sometimes, she said, what keeps them going isn't the medicine, it's knowing someone's waiting for them on the other side. I leaned closer to the kennel. I'm not going anywhere, Piper. She blinked slowly, and her tail, barely more than a wisp, moved against the blanket. It wasn't much, but it made something in my chest crack open. The sound of it was louder to me than the soft beeps of the heart monitor. A tech slipped a small dish of water inside, and I watched her nose twitch at the smell before she turned away, too weak to try. The rain outside tapped against the high windows. The city's muffled heartbeat still out there, but in here, time was measured by each slow breath she took. I remembered being a kid again, huddled on my bedroom floor during a storm, our old shepherd curled against my legs, the two of us a secret fort of warmth against the world. Piper wasn't mine, yet, but the way she looked at me made me wonder if, in some small way, she already was. The hours dragged. Nurses came and went, adjusting fluids, checking vitals, leaving soft words like breadcrumbs. Every so often, I'd murmur to her, nonsense, memories, promises I had no business making. The kind you only give to someone when you mean to keep them. Once, she shifted her head just enough that her muzzle rested against the bars near my hand. I didn't move, afraid she'd think I'd break the connection if I tried to touch her. Her breathing was shallow but steadier by the time the night shift came in. Dr. Moreno crouched beside me. If she makes it through tonight, she said, her odds go up. I glanced at the rain-slick streets through the window, thinking about how many people had walked past her without stopping. She'll make it, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Piper's eyes were half closed again, but when I spoke, they opened just a little, just enough to catch the light. That tiny flicker, that almost imperceptible wag of her tail, it felt like she just handed me a piece of hope. And I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers. The rain had stopped by morning, but the gray light filtering through the clinic windows felt heavy, as if the city was still holding its breath. Piper hadn't moved much. The white German Shepherd puppy still curled beneath her blanket, the IV line swaying slightly every time she shifted. I'd spent the night in the chair, half asleep, waking each time the heart monitor beeped a little slower or she let out a faint whimper in her sleep. Dr. Moreno came in quietly, a small bowl of soft food in her hands. "Let's see if she'll take something," she murmured, sliding the kennel door open just enough to slip inside. She crouched low, her voice gentle. "Piper, let's try, girl." Piper sniffed weakly, then turned her head away. My chest sank, but Dr. Moreno only nodded toward me. Sometimes they need to hear it from the one they trust. I took the bowl, my fingers brushing the warmth of the food, and slid it closer. "Hey, Piper, this is yours, just for you." She lifted her head a fraction, her green eyes finding mine. Slowly, almost cautiously, she nosed the food, then took the smallest bite. My heart kicked like a starting engine. "That's it," I whispered. "Good girl." She chewed once, swallowed, and took another bite, still tiny, but more than before. Her body seemed to lean toward me as she ate, as if the space between us felt safer than the blanket behind her. I stayed still, holding the bowl steady, not daring to rush her. Each small mouthful felt like a victory, a quiet defiance against the night she'd just survived. When she stopped, she rested her chin on the edge of the bowl, her eyes closing like she'd run a marathon. "She's going to need more than medicine," Dr. Moreno had told me the night before. I understood it now. Medicine could heal her body, but it wouldn't erase the emptiness in her gaze, the learned instinct to brace for harm. That part, that was on me. As the clinic settled into its morning rhythm, phones ringing, doors opening, the muffled thud of paws in the waiting room, I stayed by her side. A tech brought a fresh blanket from the dryer, the warmth steaming in the cool air, and I wrapped it around her like a promise. She sighed, and for the first time since I'd found her, her body didn't feel rigid under my hands. I didn't know who had left her like that, why they'd decided her life was disposable. But I knew one thing for certain: they were wrong. This wasn't garbage I'd picked up in an alley. This was a life. A fragile, stubborn, breathing life. and I wasn't going to let her slip away again. When she drifted into sleep, I leaned back in my chair, exhaustion tugging at me. My last thought before I closed my eyes was simple and absolute. Whatever fight Piper had left in her, I'd match it, and I'd make sure she had a reason to keep fighting. 3 days later, the sun finally broke through the Philadelphia haze, spilling warm light across the clinic floor. Piper stood in the middle of her kennel, wobbly, legs splayed like she wasn't sure how to use them anymore. But she was standing. The white German Shepherd puppy had gained a touch of strength in her eyes, a faint glimmer that hadn't been there when I found her by the dumpster. Her coat was still patchy and thin, but in the sunlight, the white shimmered where the techs had managed to brush her clean. "Look at you," I said, holding the kennel door open. Piper hesitated, nose twitching at the unfamiliar smell of the hallway. Her paws shuffled against the blanket, claws clicking once before she stepped forward. The IV was gone now, replaced by a wrap of soft bandage where the line had been. She sniffed the floor, then my shoes, then, slowly, pressed her head against my shin. That was all the permission I needed. I scooped her up, lighter than she should have been, and carried her out into the morning air. The city was alive, horns blaring, people hurrying past. But here on the clinic steps, the light was warm, the breeze soft against her ears. She lifted her head, eyes half closed, catching scents only she could understand. I had already cleared it with Dr. Marino. I'd be taking her home as a foster until she was strong enough for adoption. Or longer, she'd said with a knowing smile, like she'd already read the part of me that had no intention of letting Piper go. At my apartment, I laid a thick fleece blanket on the living room floor beside a shallow bowl of water. Piper circled once, twice, then collapsed into the blanket like it was the first real comfort she'd felt in months. She didn't sleep at first. Her eyes followed me as I moved around the room, cautious but curious. That night, she woke with a soft whimper. I was on the couch, but I slid down onto the floor beside her. "It's okay," I whispered, resting my hand where she could feel it. She let out a long sigh and pressed her back against my arm. I stayed there until her breathing evened out, until the weight of her against me felt steady. Each step she took was still a gamble against the time she'd lost. Her muscles were weak, her gait uncertain, but she was moving. Toward me, toward water, toward the sound of my voice. And every time she did, I felt it. She was gambling, and we were winning. By the end of that first day home, she'd followed me into the kitchen, sat by my feet while I filled her food bowl, and, without hesitation, ate every bite. When she finished, she lifted her head, crumbs clinging to the fur around her mouth, and met my eyes with something almost like trust. That was when I knew the fight wasn't just mine anymore. Piper was starting to fight, too. It was during her second week with me that I noticed them. Faint, pale lines circling her neck, hidden beneath the new fluff growing in. The white German Shepherd puppy had been wearing her past like an invisible collar, and now the truth was starting to show. Old rope burns, healed but unmistakable. I parted her fur gently, my stomach tightening. Whoever had tied her had done it long enough for the marks to sink deep. As I combed through her coat, my fingers snagged on something rough, an inch of frayed twine, tangled in the base of her neck fur. It crumbled in my hand as I pulled it free. Piper stood still, her green eyes searching mine like she knew I'd found something important. I slipped the piece of rope into my pocket, the weight of it heavier than it should have been. That afternoon, I took her back to the alley where I'd found her. The dumpster was still there, though the rain had washed away the puddles and trash from that day. The air smelled of fried food and exhaust, the steady rumble of traffic overhead. Piper sniffed the ground, her tail low but moving. I asked a few shopkeepers, but most shrugged, eyes sliding away like my questions were trouble they didn't want. One older woman, sweeping the front of a corner store, paused when I mentioned a white German Shepherd puppy. "I saw her," she said quietly. She was there a couple days, skinny. People just stepped around her. Then one night she wasn't there. Till you came, I guess. I asked if she'd seen who left her. The woman's broom slowed. "Truck. Old one. Didn't stop. Just tossed her out." She tapped her temple with the handle. "Some things you can't unsee." Her words stuck with me all the way home. Piper curled in the back seat, her head resting on the blanket we always traveled with. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, watching her breathe, thinking about the moment she must have hit the ground, the shock of it, the headlights pulling away. That night, as I sat on the floor beside her bed, I caught myself staring at the faint rope marks again. She was safe now, but those scars weren't going anywhere. I rubbed the fur at her neck, my fingers careful. "They tried to throw you away," I whispered, "but they didn't know what they were losing." Piper closed her eyes, leaning into my touch. The quiet hum of the city outside felt far away, like we were sealed off from it. The piece of rope was still in my pocket. I didn't know why I kept it. Maybe as proof, maybe as a reminder. But I knew this. Whoever had wanted her forgotten had failed. She was here, and she wasn't going to disappear again. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, bright and warm, the kind of day that should have belonged to easy walks and lazy sunbathing. Piper was trotting beside me through the park, her white coat catching the light, the green in her eyes more alive with every week. The white German Shepherd puppy was stronger now, her gait steady, tail wagging softly as she sniffed the grass. Then the garbage truck rounded the corner. The grinding roar of its engine shattered the calm, echoing through the narrow path. Piper froze mid-step. Her ears flattened, her body dropped low, and a trembling ran through her from neck to tail. The smell of diesel filled the air, and she bolted toward me, pressing herself hard against my legs. I crouched instantly, one hand on her shoulder. Hey, it's okay." But it wasn't. Her chest heaved, her breath coming in short bursts, eyes locked on the truck like it was something from a nightmare. And maybe it was. She buried her face against me, pushing so close it was as if she was trying to disappear inside my jacket. My hand moved over her back, feeling the taut muscles quivering under her skin. The truck passed slowly, men in neon vests tossing bags into the compactor. Piper didn't move until it was gone, and even then her eyes stayed fixed on where it had been, as if expecting it to come back. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just fear of noise. This was recognition. She had been thrown away. Not in the abstract way people say it. Literally. Tossed like garbage, her life reduced to something that could be dropped by the side of a dumpster. And now the sound, the smell, the sight of that truck ripped her right back to the moment everything went black. I sat there in the grass with her, letting her hide, letting her decide when she was ready to move. "You're not there anymore," I murmured into her fur. "You're with me. They can't hurt you again." It felt useless to say, but I said it anyway, because maybe some part of her needed to hear it over and over until it became true. After a long minute, she lifted her head, still leaning against me. Her eyes were softer, but the tremble hadn't gone. We took the long way home, far from the streets the truck might travel. By the time we reached my door, her tail had started to move again, a slow sway that told me she was trying to believe the world was safer than it had been. That night, she fell asleep with her head on my knee, something she hadn't done before, and I realized it wasn't just about taking her out of danger. It was about teaching her the danger was gone. Forever. It was a week after the park incident when I finally found someone willing to talk. Piper and I were walking near the same stretch of Philadelphia where I'd first seen her, the white German Shepherd puppy now stronger, her coat clean, but her eyes still scanning the world like it might turn on her any second. We stopped at a corner store for water, and that's when I noticed an older man leaning on a cane, watching Piper with a mix of curiosity and recognition. "Pretty girl you've got there," he said, voice gravelly. "Didn't always look like that, though, did she?" Something in the way he said it made me step closer. "You've seen her before?" He nodded slowly. "Couple months back, late evening. Old pickup, beat-up Ford, came down the alley. Didn't even stop all the way. Door swung open and they dropped her. Right there." His eyes flicked to the street like he could still see it. She hit the ground hard, rolled into the gutter, sat up for a second, confused. Then the truck was gone. My stomach turned. I pictured it, her green eyes wide, her legs scrambling on wet pavement, the sound of the truck fading. "You didn't," I started, but he cut me off. I was too far. By the time I got there, she'd crawled under that dumpster. He shifted his cane, guilt flickering in his gaze. "I left food the next day, but she wouldn't come out. Then one morning, she was just gone. Guess that's when you found her." Piper was sitting against my leg, her tail barely touching the sidewalk. I could feel the warmth of her through my jeans. My hand found the back of her neck, fingers brushing the faint scars again. "Why?" I asked, more to myself than to him. "Some folks see a life and think it's worth less than the trouble of keeping it," he said quietly. "You can't change them, but you can change her story." We left the corner store in silence, the bottle of water sweating in my hand and my thoughts heavier than the summer air. I kept seeing that old truck, hearing the slam of the door, feeling the cold of the rain-soaked alley. When we got home, I crouched down to her level. "They threw you away, Piper," I said, my voice low. "But they don't get the last word. I promise you that." She tilted her head, those green eyes locking onto mine, and for the first time I saw something new in them, something fierce. If they had wanted her to disappear, I was going to make her unforgettable. If they had made her feel worthless, I was going to make her priceless. And if they had thrown her away, I was going to make her the kind of dog no one could imagine living without. It happened on a crisp Saturday morning, the kind of day where the city felt almost gentle. The leaves along the sidewalks had just begun to turn, their edges catching the light. Piper trotted beside me on her leash, the white German Shepherd puppy no longer hesitant with every step. Her stride had a rhythm now, her tail swayed in time with it, and the soft gleam in her green eyes followed me like a shadow. We reached the park, and I unclipped her leash in the open field, my stomach tight with a mix of pride and nervousness. For weeks, I'd been coaxing her out of that protective shell, step by step, walk by walk, but today felt different. She stood a few feet away, nose twitching at the cool air, then turned toward me. For a heartbeat, she just looked at me. Then she ran. It wasn't the cautious shuffle she'd had before or the slow, unsure jog. This was a full sprint, ears back, legs stretching, the sun glinting off her white coat as she cut through the grass. Her paws kicked up bits of gold and green as she closed the distance. Her eyes locked on me like I was the only thing in the world. When she reached me, she didn't just stop. She skidded into me, pressing her chest against my legs and dropping something at my feet. A tennis ball. I didn't even know where she'd found it. I crouched, picking it up, my throat tightening. "You want to play?" I asked, half smiling, half choking on the words. She barked, sharp, certain, and nudged the ball toward me again. I threw it. She chased it with a joy so pure it felt like sunlight breaking open inside my chest. We played until she was panting, tongue lolling, her fur warm from the run. Each time she brought the ball back, her tail wagged harder, her eyes brighter. It wasn't about the game. It was about what it meant. This wasn't a dog just surviving anymore. This was a dog living. As we sat in the grass afterward, she sprawled across my lap. I realized something. That fear I'd seen in the alley, in the clinic, in the park when the garbage truck came, it was gone. Not buried. Gone. She had left her old life behind in that run, and I'd been there to see her cross the line. I stroked the soft fur behind her ears, the city's noise distant, unimportant. "You're free now, Piper," I whispered, "really free." She closed her eyes, her body heavy with trust. It struck me then, this wasn't just her victory, it was ours. The certification day came faster than I expected. Piper had passed every test the therapy dog program threw at her: obedience drills, crowd desensitization, even the simulated hospital visit where strangers reached for her without warning. The white German Shepherd puppy, who had once cowered at the world, now walked beside me with calm, steady steps, her green eyes bright but serene. Our first real visit was at Jefferson Hospital's rehab wing. The air inside was warm, carrying the faint scent of disinfectant and something sweet from the cafe down the hall. Nurses greeted us with smiles, and Piper's tail wagged gently at each one, her head held high. I could feel the tension in my own shoulders, but Piper, she just moved forward like she'd been born for this. We entered a small room where an elderly woman sat by the window, her hands clasped in her lap. She looked up slowly, eyes tired. The nurse whispered that she'd been having a hard week, no visitors, little appetite. I gave Piper the release cue, and she padded over to the woman's chair, her steps unhurried, her tail low and soft. Piper stopped at her knee, then gently placed her head in the woman's lap. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the woman's hands, thin, trembling, rose to rest on Piper's fur. Her shoulders shook, and I realized she was crying, though her lips curved into a smile. "You're beautiful," she whispered to Piper, her voice breaking. Piper stayed perfectly still, only her tail swaying in a slow rhythm, her eyes never leaving the woman's face. I felt something shift in the room, a quiet warmth replacing the sterile air. The nurse wiped at her eyes. I didn't bother hiding mine. After a while, the woman looked up at me. She makes it feel less lonely, she said. I nodded, my voice catching. That's her gift. When it was time to leave, Piper stood, gave the woman one last nudge with her nose, and followed me to the door. In the hallway, I crouched and pulled her close. You did it, I whispered, my hand pressed to the spot on her neck where the scars had been. Piper looked at me with those green eyes, steady, certain, alive. And in that moment, I knew. She had saved me just as much as I had saved her. Piper's journey will always stay with me, not just because I watched her fight her way back from the edge, but because she taught me what it really means to heal. The white German Shepherd puppy I found discarded beside a dumpster is now walking hospital halls, lifting spirits, and giving people hope just by being herself. Her scars are still there, but they no longer define her. What defines her is the way she leans into a stranger's touch, the way her tail moves when she senses someone needs her, and the way she trusts without hesitation. This little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. They're the reason dogs like Piper get a second chance, the reason that moment in the alley didn't end in silence. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. It's choosing to stand in the gap for someone who can't ask for help. I hope when you think about Piper, you remember what one act of compassion can do. It can rewrite a life. It can turn fear into trust. It can take something broken and make it whole again. If her story touched you, please share it. Every time you do, it reaches someone who might be the reason another dog survives. Somewhere right now, there's another Piper waiting for someone to stop, to notice, to care. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.